Hello?
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
This is Nancy Reynolds.
Hi, Nance.
How are you?
I'm fine, dear. How are you?
That's good. I have a gentleman here who wants to talk to you.
Well, it would be my pleasure.
I hope you want to talk to him.
Absolutely. I've waited a long time.
I know you have, and here he is, Governor Reagan.
Hello there.
Good afternoon, Governor Reagan. I'm very grateful for these few minutes out of your day.
Well, very happy to do it.
I realize you're very, very busy, and I have a long string of questions written down here. Well, not that long, really, but ever since I first made the announcement that I might be able to reach you by telephone, I've gotten, hundreds of questions that people wanted me to ask, and I've taken the liberty of channeling them in one direction, and that direction is very simply this. I think the newspapers and I think other media pretty well handle the day-to-day workings of the state government. I think the things that we're most interested in and would like to talk about a little bit is your life, your personal life as the governor of the state of California.
Well, all right. What phase or what would you like to know other than the fact that I have spent most of my waking hours and certainly no sleeping ones in this office to such an extent that I'm getting stir-crazy and I'm threatening rebellion.
Well, I can believe that. Governor, first of all, why would a man very, very successful in one career, in one phase of business, try an entirely new field, start in something all new, go into something entirely different?
Well, sometimes decisions kind of just seem to be forced on you. It isn't something you set out to do. By that I mean I didn't come to a moment in my life in which I said, I am going to do this now, or I want to do this. Whatever the circumstances were, as you know, for a number of years I had been on the mashed potato circuit talking about government and expressing my fears of the course that our nation was taking, and somehow I found myself in a position in which I suppose what happened was some people said, look, you've been talking about it, you've put yourself in a position where maybe you can do something about it. And I don't mean to try to sound noble or anything, but I believe that you come to a point where we all have to pay our way.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot to pay for. I've had a very good life, and people have been very wonderful to me, and so I'm paying my way.
Well, that's very interesting. Governor, during the election, I couldn't help but notice that a great deal of the competing campaign was geared to the fact that a person in entertainment, an entertainer, an actor, how would that possibly qualify them for a life in politics? Now, you won by quite a plurality, and it's all over and done with now, and I just wonder, looking back, whether you feel that your background in the entertainment business was really an asset or a liability in terms of the election.
Well, obviously, the opponents tried to make my previous occupation a liability.
Mm-hmm.
I never pretended that anything in that occupation, I never offered that as evidence as to why I should have the office. But I think this would be true of any occupation. We have men up here in our legislature who are doctors, men in the legal profession, men from almost every line, construction industry, and I'm sure that every one of them would say that he found certain things in his past experience, not only in his private life, but in his business and his profession, that he's called upon and have helped him in certain areas, but no one of them would say that he is qualified for this just by virtue of his occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And nor would I. But I'll tell you this, I was surprised how many times things from my previous occupation came to my rescue and turned out to be assets under certain circumstances. And that's still true. For one thing, I was amazed, really. I never would have offered my profession as any defense at all for seeking this. I offered some sideline things, the experience I'd had by way of representing my union in collective bargaining and in dealing with government agencies and so forth and the problems of our people. That, I thought, was valuable experience. But once in this job, I'd discovered more than I'd ever realized that there's no business in the world that where you have more contact with people and dealing with people in large numbers than you do in the theatrical or the entertainment field. If you don't understand the people and what they want in that business, as you well know, in the business you're in, you're out of business.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you feel that more people, non-political people, ought to make the step and get involved either in local politics, county politics, state politics? More people should get involved who are not and cannot be considered politicians or career politicians?
I sure do. Let me just point out that when this whole system was started in this country, it was started on the basis and envisioned just the rank-and-file citizens. First of all, there were no politicians. Mm-hmm. They were starting from scratch. And they envisioned people giving a certain period of their lives and certain time in community service by virtue of holding office, just as they now do in their own service and social clubs and so forth, and in chambers of commerce. Down through the years, we have turned more and more, as government got more complex, to the idea of the career politician. And I don't want to say that he has no place. Certainly there are many great statesmen at every level of government who've made careers of this, and they're the pros, and I think they're absolutely necessary. But with the pros, we must have constantly this element of the common sense thinking of the people, the non-political, who are concerned with the problems of themselves and their neighbors and in finding solutions to those problems. Otherwise, our whole system degenerates down to a little clique of professional politicians running the show, and then you no longer have government of and by and for the people.
I see. Well, I would guess that politics is almost like getting married. You can talk about it and think about it, but you don't really know what you're up against until the words are said. Is political life so far, has it been pretty much what you anticipated, or have there been some real surprises?
Oh, there have been some surprises, but for the most part, it was kind of like, I'm happy to say, it was like wading into the pool instead of jumping in. You know, I went through in the many weeks before you took office after the election of fearing the unknown. You had a feeling of suddenly it was going to chop on your shoulders, and you were going to say, you know, how did this happen? And it was all going to be so huge you wouldn't know how to grapple with it. But it was, as I say, like wading in. You began taking up problems of organizing the administration during the interim period before the inauguration, and by the inauguration you were already dealing with problems at hand, and it's just you just moved in, and all of a sudden here you are, and there never did come that one great moment of realization or anything. You just waded in.
Well, what about personal life? Now, I'm sure that the jolt for someone going into politics for the first time, particularly into a high office in politics, would be a sudden, complete lack of privacy. But I'm sure, having been in pictures for so long, that's nothing new to you, the lack of privacy. But is it different in politics than it was as a film star?
Well, it's more pronounced, yes. But as you say, I've often wondered, what is the businessman or the professional man who would make this step for the first time, what his reaction might be. But this is one area where show business did help. You have been used to kind of being in a fishbowl.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little surprised to discover that it is even more pronounced in politics than it was there. That has been true. Of course, there's been a great change in our personal life. You know, I had life whipped down to a pretty good deal by way of television. My television shows were such that they demanded a very minimum of time to have a very good job. In fact, a lot of my friends in the acting business, by way of the GE Theater in Death Valley Days, said I had the best jobs in television. I had it worked down to where I spent about 4 or 5 days a week at the ranch riding horses. And I haven't even seen a horse for the last few months.
I don't imagine you anticipate seeing one in the near future either, do you?
Well, this is part of the rebellion. I'm getting a little rebellious now. At first, it wasn't so bad when the weather stayed so bad up here this spring. We've had such a wet spring. But right now, the sun's shining, and the ground looks dry enough to ride on, and I'm beginning to itch.
Well, Governor Reagan, now what about relaxation hours, not only in politics, but in the entertainment business? Don't you ever have a longing to take your wife out to a restaurant, to a movie, to go somewhere and just blend with the crowd and not be recognized and not be acknowledged and just be one of the other people there enjoying themselves?
Yes, let me say that is something. First of all, we haven't felt it too acutely because in these first few months, this whole thing has been so busy that there's been no opportunity to do such a thing. But I know that it's going to grow. There is an added element you didn't have before of a thing called security now, and you can't fight them. Those entrusted with it say it's essential. And suddenly, you don't just go for a walk by yourselves or get in a car and drive someplace in the evening or decide to go to an out-of-the-way restaurant. And yes, there's a kind of a claustrophobia feeling. There's a feeling of not being completely free, and it does bother.
It's part of the price you pay, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
In all these years now in the fishbowl, have you ever devised a disguise, dark glasses, or a putty nose?
No. No. Of course, you remember that in the fishbowl there was one thing about it. In your own town, in Hollywood, unless it was a big premiere or something advertised and announced where a gang of you were going to be at one time, you could... just put on a sweater and a pair of slacks and decide to go out to a movie. And while there were always some people who'd maybe turn and look, you could do that. And you couldn't do it in another town where you were, more of a novelty. But there were, I guess, in our town, there were enough people around all the time that they'd seen and that it wasn't too tough. But that is gone.
Well, you can't kind of disappoint me. I think I had a mental picture of you going out to dinner with a long beard or something.
Well, maybe I'll have to try that.
What about as a father? Do you think that youngsters can be raised with any semblance of normalcy in a governor's mansion?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know whether he could have if we'd have stayed in that governor's mansion, but he is being raised that way now by the fact that we moved out of that governor's mansion.
Uh-huh.
We moved into a neighborhood where I go around the corner now on the way home in the evening, and I very often see as many as 30 bikes scattered around on the lawn. There's the place is alive with kids, the whole neighborhood, and there's a big yard at this house. There wasn't at the mansion, and the mansion was right down in a commercial area. There was no stepping foot for him outside of the limited grounds because... As I say, it was just a completely commercial neighborhood. There was no one to play with. One day, I just broke my heart to look out the window, and I saw him, the skipper, playing catch with one of the policemen out there on the driveway. And the only thing that saved us in these first few months was the bad weather, the fact that he had to be indoors so much. But the release, when we moved over to this other house, and he's already got a gang... And they're in and out and around, and come a Saturday, you don't see them from morning till night. It's just great.
But does anybody ever poke the governor's kid in the nose?
Oh, listen, there's no feeling of that. We had a little trouble, not trouble. We had to remind a few parents who had some kind of feeling that maybe they had to get clearance from the Secret Service or something to send their kids over, and we put them straight immediately that, look, a kid's a kid, and they were all welcome. And now, I counted noses the other day. There were 20 kids wrestling on the lawn, and I went around counting noses. I'd just gotten in from the airport, and I couldn't find mine. He wasn't among the 20. So I finally tapped one on the shoulder and asked him, and he said, well, he and another 20 were down in the basement. So I found them down in the basement.
So the governorship holds no problems for the younger generation.
No. I don't have as much time as with them, and yet I can't feel sorry for myself on that because this thing that I told you about the leisure that I did have before taking this job gave me a lot more time than the normal or average father has with his son, who has to, 9 to 5 it every day. So I'm now a little more in the position of the average fellow than I was before, and this is taking a little scrambling to capitalize on the times we can so that he won't be too conscious of this change.
Well, Governor Reagan, you've been very gracious, and I've taken more of your time than I intended to. I have one more question, and it might be a little, I don't know whether it's a question we can answer. It might be just a little too broad, but we can try it. And that question is very simply this, and I can't think of anyone in the state of California better qualified to answer this one last question, and that is there one major problem, or what is the most important single problem facing Californians today?
Oh, boy. What is the biggest single problem, the most important facing Californians today? Well, I'll tell you, I think that I'd have to go right back to the old one I've been talking about for 3 months. All of the dreams we have, all of the improvements we'd like to make, plans that we have for mentally retarded, for some of our disabled children, for improvements in education, all of them have to kind of hold off for a moment while we solve this financial problem. This is the one that we must get this budget and the fiscal situation straightened out so that we're on solid ground. We're like the family that's been living on borrowed money and part-time employment, and we've got to put ourselves on this sound basis. Then we can begin the constructive job of looking ahead to things we want to do and things that we can pay for and carry on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Is there a solution in the foreseeable future?
Sure, there's a solution. They'll pass our budget and they'll pass our tax bill that we've asked for. We worked that tax bill out right down to the penny as the least that we could get by with, and at the same time, we could have gotten by with a little less without offering property tax reform, but we want to offer some help in the property taxpayer. If this is passed, it will meet our financial problems and put us on a pay-as-you-go basis starting with the coming year.
Governor Reagan, thank you very, very much. You've been very kind, and as I said, we've run way over, and I'm very, very grateful for your time.
Well, thank you. It's been a privilege and a pleasure.
Pleasure indeed. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.